You know, the last episode was pretty damn heavy. Nobody likes discussing something that unpleasant, and while I'm glad I managed to enlighten quite a few people, what I really don't like is being Captain Bringdown. So you know what? Let's shake things up a bit. Let's do something positive and give everybody some warm, fuzzy feelings, eh? So let's sit back, wrap ourselves in a Snuggie, put on some hot cocoa, and give Sweetie Belle a bone-crushing hug. We're gonna count down the top 10 best episodes of Friendship is Magic. For realsies!
Restless was the world we knew, and cheerless were the days. Of colors run together in an endless mirror maze. And then two sisters brought us out of discord's dark caprice, and gave us lights to guide us into harmony and peace.
A lot of bronies slammed Ponyville Confidential for being too harsh on the CMC. Then again, a lot of bronies slammed Mysterious Ne'er-Do-Well and the Crystal Empire as well. A lot of bronies aren't too bright. This is exactly the kind of reaction somebody should get when they engage in tabloid journalism. Whether you're working for a corrupt newspaper, a print tabloid, or engaging in doxing. And you can't hide behind the veil of anonymity for very long, and the consequences will catch up to you. Some would say it's wrong for the people of Ponyville to be so cruel to the CMC, and I would argue that it was wrong for them to invade and publicize people's privacy in the first place. The townsfolk are shutting them out because they can't trust them anymore. They feel betrayed, so they're putting as much distance between them as possible. And for anybody who's ever been subjected to the internet's rumor mill, it can be very difficult to trust somebody who you know spreads rumors and sensationalism like wildfire. This is especially true today. Not only does the internet make tabloid journalism more widespread and problematic, but the internet's veil-like anonymity can make groups of people who are dedicated to that sort of stalking and harassment seem terrifying at first. Groups like Anonymous, Gamergate, and the Burning Legion can seem intimidating if you aren't aware of the exact size and scope of their operations. Hint: tiny and ineffective. Maybe the CMC weren't aware of it, but what they're doing was engaging in a proto-form of cyberbullying. This is what that kind of thing looks like, cowardly hiding behind a pseudonym and spreading whatever bullshit they can think of to get more traffic. Admittedly, they are being blackmailed by Diamond Tiara, but I think the solution to that was obvious in and of itself. This is exactly the sort of reaction you should get when you behave like this, whether you intended to hurt people or not, and the icing on the cake is without a doubt Rarity. Rarity takes the whole thing in stride, and indeed so does the entire Maid 6 until the rumors start targeting her. Because this is how a lot of people react to this kind of harassment, casually writing it off as harmless gossip until it happens to them and they finally get some perspective on the issue. I know that was me for a very long time until I grew up and learned to empathize. Is it harsh? Yes, that's life. Life is harsh, especially when you have stupid beliefs on how the world should work. Life will beat those out of you. And that's a lesson that the CMC will never forget simply by virtue of how unwaveringly brutal the whole thing was.
To the citizens of Ponyville, for some time now, you've been reading this column to get the latest dirt and the hottest buzz. But this will be my final piece. We want to apologize for the pain and embarrassment we've caused. You see, I'm actually 3 little fillies: Sweetie Belle, Apple Bloom, and Scootaloo.
As the popularity of our column grew, we got swept up in the hype. We knew that what we were doing didn't feel quite right, but we ignored the guilt because every pony seemed to want to read what we were writing.
From now on, we promise to respect every pony else's privacy, and we won't engage in hurtful gossip anymore.
All we can do is ask for your forgiveness, Ponyville. Signing off for the very last time, XOXO, Gabby Gums.
And gave us lights to guide us into harmony and
Ever since Knights of the Old Republic 2 came out, I've long been a fan of genuine moral ambiguity. The idea that what may seem like the honest and upstanding thing to do can, and often does, have its repercussions. And more often than not, the ideal solution may not be the one that sits comfortably with your ethical standard. It's a subject implied by Star Trek Voyager, and there are a lot of episodes of Friendship is Magic that deal with it as well. Keep Calm and Flutter On touched on it for a bit with Twilight's likely necessary reforming spell, and now we have bats. Already you can see the makings of a massive conundrum here. Applejack has her very livelihood at stake with an infestation of fruit bats. Like any farmer, she wants to get rid of them as soon as she possibly can. It's never explicitly stated, but I can only assume get rid of them means exterminate. Fluttershy, the ever-pacifist and animal lover, wants Applejack to endure a year of financial hardship on the off chance that she might have better crops next year. This is a truly ambiguous situation. Regardless of the outcome, someone's gonna suffer, and suffer hard. Twilight comes up with the potential solution of simply altering the bats' minds to make them not want to eat the apples. And to those of you who like to squawk about her subjugating free will, this was the closest thing to a light side decision you're ever going to get.
You want to buy some death sticks?
You don't want to sell me death sticks.
I don't want to sell you death sticks.
You want to go home and rethink your life.
I want to go home and rethink my life.
And that concept of unforeseen consequences is further reinforced by the fact that Twilight's spell has the unintended side effect of turning Fluttershy into a feral bat pony, because of magic, I guess?
Don't ask me, I just work here.
The lesson is somewhat clumsy, and they actually improved upon it later in the season, but they did eventually find a more pragmatic solution by sectioning off one part of the orchard, and that's something I like to see in Aesop-driven storytelling. Less of this black and white morality and more active problem solving. And it seems like I'm the only one who asks this of the show. This is a genuinely gray situation. Applejack put up a sanctuary for the bats, but she's still going to see a smaller crop because of it. The Apple family is still going to suffer in some way as a result of this act of kindness. Doing the quote-unquote right thing often comes at a cost, and usually a hefty one, and I feel that not enough shows present that, but Bats, however clumsy it may be, certainly does.
Fluttershy, I'm real sorry I didn't take your suggestion in the first place.
And don't forget, now you'll get seeds that will grow into even bigger and better apple trees. Does that mean what I think it means?
Yep, more cider too.
And gave us lights to guide us into harmony and
When I put Equestria Girls on the worst episodes list, a few people were quick, rather suspiciously quick, to claim that it didn't qualify because it was a film rather than an actual episode. Now, I disagree by virtue of go f*** yourselves. They're made by the same production staff, same writers, voice actors, same everything. They might as well be long-form episodes. If we're going to discount the movies, we might as well discount the two-parters, and we're not about to start doing that, are we? Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway, number 8 is Rainbow Rocks. Rainbow Rocks is a significant improvement over the original film. There's a better story with higher stakes, there's a far more interesting antagonist this time around, and unlike the original Equestria Girls that had no good music, Rainbow Rocks has 3 good songs. Well, okay, 2.5 good songs. Let's not split hairs here. Most of this movie's appeal comes down to 2 things. 1, Sunset Shimmer being super adorable, and 2, Kazumi Evans being super terrifying. I don't think I've ever seen an otherwise dull and energetic movie carried so well entirely on its villain's shoulders. In fact, most of my praise for this entire film can be seen in Adagio's section of my Who Was the Best Villain video. As I said in regards to Equestria Girls, now that we don't have to reintroduce the audience to every single character under the sun, Rainbow Rocks was more than capable of delivering on a solid story. Don't get me wrong, it's a popcorn movie in every meaning of the term, but it's a really fun and really excellently made popcorn movie. No, I haven't got anything left to say. Move on. I've gushed enough to be shipped via FedEx.
Oh, whoa, now that you're under our spell.
and gave us lights to guide us into harmony and peace.
To say that Rainbow Dash gets a raw deal with episodes would be an understatement. A more accurate statement would be Rainbow Dash gets repeatedly beaten into the ground by the cold, cruel mallet of His Royal Majesty King Larson. While she hasn't had a truly awful episode, Rainbow's overly brash personality doesn't lend itself well to leading roles. An episode centered around her would be best suited to forcing her to come to grips with the fact that she can't control There There we go, Larson, you beautiful man. Come here so I can kiss your big soppy face. What I love about Tanks for the Memories is its brutal, unwavering honesty. We could sit here and talk about the 5 stages of grief for the 47th goddamn time, but I'd much rather talk about the colder, more necessary metaphor hidden within the episode, namely that death is inevitable and you cannot stop it. Some would consider that cynical, but there's a certain degree of comfort in the inevitable. Most of us in our adulthood know what death is and we're comfortable with it. That knowledge is what allows us to make the best of what we have, but more importantly that you will inevitably lose somebody close to you, and it's going to hurt, and no matter how prepared for it you think you are, this is going to be you. The only downside to Tanks for the Memories is that its own lesson is devalued by the fact that Tank returns relatively quickly. I've always found that death, both as a lesson and a story element, is its most effective when a character's absence can be effectively felt by the cast and the audience. Also, the fact that Fluttershy effectively bludgeons Rainbow with reality. After trying and failing to explain it to her, she realized that she had no other choice than to hit her right where it hurt. I'll have more on this later, but suffice to say, Fluttershy has been one of the best characters of Season 5.
Well, ready for some winter fun?
I'm gonna hang here and read to him a bit. That little guy can never get to sleep without a bedtime story. I'll be right there.
And gave us lights to guide us into harmony and peace.
When you think of the premieres and finales, you typically think of a big grand-scale conflict, or a gala, or a musical. But it goes without saying that these are typically the highlights of the season, and there's a lean toward loud, bombastic villains with the showmanship of Tim Curry, and then we get pure, dumbfounded terror. It's astounding how terrifying the Crystal Empire managed to be with the constant and ever-looming threat of whatever the hell King Sombra was supposed to be. But unlike a lot of other hide-in-the-shadows antagonists, he was sat patiently outside waiting for the shield to fall, like a spider just waiting for its prey. And the vast majority of the episode is spent in a state of panic as the main 6 try to keep the town from realizing that literal Armageddon is outside the front door. I haven't seen something this suspenseful since the original Jurassic Park's T-Rex introduction. You don't even need Sombra there, just the sheer level of post-traumatic stress disorder going on in the Crystal Empire is enough to tell you that this guy was vicious and cruel, which is strange because his design seems to be perfectly suited to another loud ham of a villain. Look at this thing, he's a freaking red and black unicorn wearing spiked armor and a big majestic king's cape. I can almost hear Alan Rickman's voice oozing out of him, and the fact that they kept him as this ominous force just outside of the Empire is very effective. It's almost as if Sombra is so powerful that they know they couldn't fight him if it really came to that, and so the entire goal is just keeping him out. Even Celestia and Luna just sealed him in the ice like the freaking Lich King. This isn't just the apprehension of a fight, this is pure anxiety and terror, the kind that leaves you on the edge of your seat just waiting to see if they're going to make it to the Crystal Heart in time. I mean, you know that they will, and that's what makes it all the more effective. Also, congratulations, Shining Armor, you're the new Mr. Incredible.
Turns out you were. Turns out I was. Turns out you were. Turns out I was. Turns out you were prepared for this. Yeah, I knew everything was gonna be fine.
And gave us lights to guide us into harmony and peace.
There's a lesson you end up learning pretty quickly in your adulthood. Sometimes you're going to run into people who are simply too stupid or too bullheaded to listen to you. And the more familiar you become with a person, the more you recognize a person's failings, the more effectively you can get through to them by tailoring your approach to better suit them. Testing 1, 2, 3 tried to hit this point home, but I honestly think that too much emphasis is put on education with that, especially in real life. Rainbow Dash is somebody who simply cannot be lectured into learning. She has to learn lessons more practically than any other member of the main 6. Once she's put in a position position where she can feel the real effects, she learns very well. Every episode centered around Rainbow has had her friends come to this conclusion gradually as the episode progressed. But you would think that after knowing Rainbow for so long, they would know that she has to be directly confronted with her own behavior to learn from it. Well, there was one time where they did. The mysterious mare duel is the only example of the main six being proactive when faced with the necessity to teach an important lesson to Rainbow about her unnecessary showboating. Recognizing that this is Rainbow we're talking about, they immediately set up a plan to outplay her and force her to confront her own failings. Is it cruel? Yes. Is it mean-spirited? Yes. Was it necessary? Yes. This is a consistent theme with Rainbow Dash in that the best way to get through to her is to bruise her ego. This is true with anybody who has an ego. Once you've embarrassed them, they become very introspective and start rethinking their actions. However, many people don't recognize that and stubbornly stick to methods to teach somebody that simply won't work in this sort of scenario. Mysterious Mare Duel is telling of the fact that the main six know each other, not just socially, but personally. They know how to deal with one of them if they go off the deep end and how to bring them back into line. The rest of the series doesn't show this all that much, but it is present. Your best friends are the ones who can best teach you because they know how to best penetrate that thick skull of yours. This is the first time, and perhaps the only time, where the main six have shown to be savvy. Like, we're not doing this bullshit again, we're gonna hit her where it hurts. And I have to applaud it for being effective. Also, there's a lot of humor in the fact that they decided to show up somebody who was obsessed with fame and glory by disguising themselves as Darkwing Duck, a character who himself was obsessed with fame and glory. Yes, Meriwether Williams, you're very clever and you get a cookie.
Sounds like you've got a letter to write to Princess Celestia.
Already got it covered. As your ghostwriter, I've already penned a letter to the princess.
That's nice of you, Spike, but I really want to write this letter myself.
Oh, come on. I wrote the whole thing already.
Okay, let's hear it.
Dear Princess Look out! It's a real ghost!
And gave us lights to guide us into harmony and peace.
I frequently use this scene to demonstrate that Fluttershy suffers a lot more than simple anxiety or stage fright, and I'm on record as having been tired of the first 4 seasons treating Fluttershy like the dagger of time, but I have to say that Fluttershy episodes are like Nicolas Cage. When they're good, they're really good. The thing about Fluttershy is that despite being nuttier than rat crap in a pistachio factory, she also has very impressive fortitude. Despite having a medical form of anxiety, Fluttershy has had to put up with eternal night, being shoved into the lair of a creature she fears the most, having her mind bent, being in the middle of a changeling invasion, being in the line of fire of Satan himself, whatever the hell these are, Tirek, and taming an eldritch abomination like it's a puppy.
Maybe I don't need to be afraid of people all the time. Maybe it's people who need to be afraid of me!
Fluttershy clearly has more fear of the mundane, which makes sense. I'm an awkward, speechless dolt when making a professional phone call, but if I get stopped by the police, I'll leave them on the floor laughing like crazy. And that's where Hurricane Fluttershy comes in. This is actually the first time that Fluttershy has made a serious effort to get in control of her anxiety and not let it control her life. And my god does it show. When she's putting in that training to contribute more to her wing power, you can see the determination in there. It's as if Fluttershy looked at her own anxiety and said, "Get the f*** out of the way, this shit will not beat me." This is what I love about Fluttershy and why I was so angry at her petulant development from season 1 onward. She certainly puts in the most effort out of any of the main 6 and ends up with the most to show for it. Even at her worst, Fluttershy makes the most leaps and bounds out of any other character, not just in Friendship is Magic, but everywhere. Fluttershy, while in need of proper counseling, is somebody who clearly doesn't want to be such a wreck whenever she steps out of her door. She doesn't want to be driven into a panic when she's put in the spotlight. She wants to be able to function like her friends do, and the sheer amount of effort she puts into that in episode after episode, while frequently undone, is what is truly admirable about her.
Dear Princess Celestia, sometimes you can feel like what you have to offer is too little to make a difference. But today, I learned that every pony's contribution is important, no matter how small. If you just keep your head high, do your best, and believe in yourself, anything can happen.
And gave us lights to guide us into harmony and peace.
One character I can honestly say I didn't like when I first started watching this show was Twilight. Season 1 had her given a very dry character. This had to do with the fact that she was often shoehorned into every episode specifically to get the lesson she would need to deliver. As the series went on, the writers became far more graceful with how they presented their Aesops. But throughout Season 1, I think it's safe to say that with the exception of a few moments of adorable childishness, Twilight was one of the more dull characters. And then she snapped. Lesson 0 is my favorite episode of the series and catapulted Twilight from a character I'd never cared that much about to my favorite of the main 6. We've always liked to talk about how the main 6 have had their own little mental breakdowns, but this one just takes the cake. Or cupcakes. Because she has cupcakes. And she's nuts. Lesson 0 was more than just a fun romp through Twilight's broken psyche, it also served to remove an aspect of the show that had been handicapping it for an entire season. Twilight's necessary inclusion in every Season 1 episode was the thing that made her so dry because the writers had to include her even if she didn't fit the scene or not. Removing that aspect with Princess Celestia tasking everybody with friendship reports allowed Twilight to come into her own as a character and be involved in areas she was best suited to and nothing else. Which I think everyone will agree has benefited her greatly. Lesson 0 was the episode that allowed Twilight to evolve into one of the funniest, cutest, and most compelling characters the series has ever had. The episode itself is a very funny look into her insecurities, but its effect on the series has been one of the most profound. The main character of a series has to be very well thought out. No TV series can survive a boring protagonist. Think about how much Avatar would have suffered if Aang had been boiled down to a very dull and overly spread out shell of what he actually was. Oh wait. You can have characters you don't like, but if that character is Twilight, you're in for a really bad time, especially with how much the show centers around her first and foremost. She was in desperate need of a refresh and she got one. Boy, did she get one.
How did you know I was in trouble?
Your friend Spike made me aware that you were letting your fears get the best of you. I commend him for taking your feelings seriously. Now, if you will all excuse me, I must return to Canterlot. I'm expecting some mail.
Y'all heard the princess. Spike, take a letter.
And gave us lights to guide us into harmony and peace.
I don't think I can name a single person who is genuinely curious about Twilight's old tower, or those ponies she left behind in Canterlot, or anything else from the very first scene of Friendship is Magic's premiere. It sort of slipped us by while half of us were demanding episodes centering around world building, which is a stupid idea, and episodes centering around background ponies, which is an even dumber idea. So Amending Fences is an episode I didn't know I wanted, but once I had it, I wanted it like chocolate. Twilight episodes are always good. I can't think of one that was ever truly a downer, and having the now Princess of Friendship have to take a look back on how she behaved in the past is quite a personal episode for me. As a content creator, I'm constantly looking back at my old work with a more critical eye than I'd had when I'd first created it, and there's a certain degree of shame in digging up your own past and realizing just how much you've grown and how many people you may have hurt in the process of that growing. And while Twilight's friends are understanding, as well-adjusted adults tend to be, one in particular isn't feeling quite so chummy. Counterpoints to Twilight's development are nothing new. Sunset Shimmer was the first, showing a pony who was so absorbed in blind ambition she'd alienated everybody around her. Starlight Glimmer was the next, showing a pony so obsessed with being exceptional that she started a cult around stripping others of their unique skills. But Moondancer was the first true counterpoint to Twilight, showing somebody who was just as reclusive as Twilight was, and to a far more damaging degree. A road that Twilight herself could have very well gone down had she not been forced to unite the elements of harmony. It shows the unique relationship Friendship is Magic has with introversion. Equestria is such a social kingdom that being reclusive can be almost suicidal, and the inability to function in crowds is akin to a mental illness. I like to think that this is the angle the show staff are going for, that it's okay to have small social circles and whatnot, but if you're cut off from everybody and literally cannot stomach simply being in a crowd, there's something more serious going on. This is evidence with Moondancer's breakdown after Twilight finally wears through her thick skin, and with how bad Twilight feels at having been the one who put her there in the first place. Without a doubt, an absolutely stellar episode, and if you haven't seen it, trust me, see it. Like now, pause the video and go watch it again if you have to.
I'm sorry, Moondancer. I've faced magical creatures, the end of Equestria, all sorts of things. But seeing how my actions affected you, that was one of the worst feelings I've ever had.
Thank you, Twilight. I never realized how much I needed to hear that.
And gave us lights to guide us into harmony and peace.
When Feely Vanilli came out, I was ready to give up on Fluttershy and the writing team when it came to how they handled her in an episode. Her developments always took a constant regression every time they brought her out because the only conflict they could ever make for her was she's terrified to the point of psychosis, but nobody's going to do anything about it. One of the reasons Fluttershy episodes have a habit of getting to me is because Fluttershy is one of the most interesting characters on a surface level. Her protective nature, along with her primary virtue being kindness, means that you can do so many things with her. There are an infinite number of episode ideas exploring an infinite number of themes to teach little kids. And with the writers squandering that, I was ready to skip Fluttershy episodes entirely from that point on. Literally 2 weeks later, they proved me wrong. It Ain't Easy Being Breezy's is the shining example of what you can do with a character like Fluttershy, and it all comes down to that last third of the episode, when Fluttershy realizes that she has been too kind and given too much, that the Breezes have taken advantage of her, and that it is in both her and their best interest to show them the door. When I first saw this episode, I instantly thought about a small scene from Knights of the Old Republic 2, where Kreia lectures the player on how a perceived act of kindness has just as much potential to harm someone as it does to help them.
Thank you, stranger. I won't forget your kindness.
Why did you do such a thing? Such kindnesses will mean nothing. His path is set. Giving him what he has not earned is like pouring sand into his hands. And would that be a kindness? What if by surviving another day he brings a greater darkness upon another? The Force binds all things. The slightest push, the smallest touch, sends echoes throughout life. Even an act of kindness may have more severe repercussions than you know or can see. By giving him something he has not earned, perhaps all you have helped him become is a target. Seeing another elevated often brings the eyes of others who suffer. And perhaps in the end, all you have wrought is more pain. And that is my lesson to you. Be careful of charity and kindness, lest you do more harm with open hands than with a clenched fist.
Usually this is a big no-no in a children's series, especially for a character that's supposed to embody the very spirit of kindness itself. Sure, a lot of media aimed at adults would have no problem covering that topic, but for kids? We always try to teach our kids to be unconditionally nice to each other, even when we are never that way ourselves. It's one of those incredibly idealistic messages we always push on kids, and yet here they're bold-facedly telling them that unconditional kindness and generosity doesn't actually help people. An angle I thought they were going to take with Rarity Takes Manhattan, yet didn't. This, to me, is what mature means. They don't explain this in a staunch black or white, all or nothing, guns or terrorism wins sort of way. It's a very careful lesson in that while Fluttershy has to be harsh with both the bees and the breezies, Seabreeze's anger and aggressiveness only makes the problems he's experiencing worse. What does this mean? Well, it means that different situations and different problems call for different actions. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all attitude. It's asking kids to think and realize that life has tricky situations, that there's no such thing as gospel truth. Smart, sensible, reasonable people assess the situation and act accordingly to an ideal solution. Stubborn, immature, poorly adjusted individuals deal in absolutes. When I said you could do a lot of really cool things with Fluttershy, I meant it. As a character, Fluttershy has more potential for compelling storytelling and lessons than all of the other main six combined. In a show almost entirely centered around social and extrapersonal growth, Fluttershy is the catalyst that serves those lessons the best. She struggles the most with situations that the other main six can handle easily, and there are a lot of kids in her situation that simply don't improve their social compatibility because nobody bothers to teach them. This is the perfect example of that, and that seemed to carry on because throughout all of Season 5, Fluttershy has been absolutely wonderful. She seem to have taken the Breezy's lessons to heart and shown more remarkable growth because of it. She's become probably the most stable and well-adjusted member of the main six. I mean, holy crap, talk about a turnaround. It Ain't Easy Being Breezy's is the best episode of Friendship is Magic, with its combination of a surprisingly mature lesson and that character actively taking that lesson to heart. This is what Rarity Takes Manhattan should have been. This is what Feely Vanilli should have been. This is what Do Princesses Dream of Magic Sheep should have been. Now, you know what? This is what every episode should be. I'm Jerry. Thank you for watching.